Shalom and welcome to another episode in our ongoing series called Faith Journeys with God in the Land. Today I'm standing on the Tel of Jezreel overlooking the Harod Valley. Tel Jezreel is an archaeological site right on the edge of the Harod Valley, which is the eastern finger, if you will, of the broader Jezreel Valley. Now behind me is the hill of Moreh, where the Shunammite woman lived. Remember the story from 2 Kings chapter 4, where her son dies of heat stroke and Elisha comes from the Carmel range and restores him to life. This particular area of Jezreel is an interesting one because as we take a walk along the Tel here, and you can see over my shoulder a lot of the edge of the Tel. This site is not really developed at all. It is an archaeological site excavated years ago, but its location is important. In fact, the Tel of Jezreel is an archaeological site that I think needs some more attention. Maybe a team of archaeologists have to come and renew their digs here because of the mentioning of the site of Jezreel in the Bible. First of all, in 1 Kings 18, remember Elijah on Mount Carmel confronts the prophets of Baal. And at the end of that story, Ahab takes a chariot to this city, and Elijah runs to this city. That's maybe the first long-distance run mentioned in the Bible. But later on, we have a story in the 21st chapter of 1 Kings, and I'll turn around so that you can perhaps see more of this valley, this Harod Valley that leads into the wider Jezreel Valley, and again, the hill of Moreh. But perhaps somewhere down there near the spring of the city is where Naboth, the Jezreelite, had a vineyard. And if you recall, Ahab wanted this vineyard. Now, Ahab and his wife Jezebel were not too kosher, can I say. He was an evil man, and he wanted this valley. In fact, maybe I'll get to a point where you can see where it is suggested where the spring of the city was located, and maybe Naboth's vineyard was close by. In fact, right there, down in that cluster of darker trees is where the spring of the city was located. So 1 Kings chapter 21 mentions this. Naboth, of course, is killed. He's accused of doing something he didn't do. And indeed, Ahab takes possession of the vineyard. Now, this is not a good thing because later on in chapters 8 and 9, especially of 2 Kings, we read more about what happened here at Jezreel. In fact, across the way on the east side of the Jordan River, in the valley itself, is the place called the Hills of Gilead, where Ramoth Gilead is located. Now, there's been a battle there going on between the Israelites and even the Judeans who come and fight as well against the Arameans led by Hazael. And the story is an interesting one because in that 9th chapter then, here's Jehu. At this point he's not the king, but he's anointed to be king. And he comes riding his chariot like a maniac. And now behind my shoulder you can almost see him coming from the east. And the lookout tower, the guys spotted him and say, "Oh, that looks like Jehu. He rides like a maniac in his chariot." Well, eventually Jehu would become the king, but what happened later at the end of chapter 9 is that Jezebel actually met a very, unfortunate way of dying. She's up there perhaps on the wall outside or looking down a window, and she has makeup on. She's arranged her hair. I mean, it's almost comical because what will happen is that she would be thrown off the wall and horses would trample her to death, nothing really left at all. And that happened here. Not a pleasant story to talk about faith journeys with God in the land. But indeed, Jezreel, this site of Jezreel that you see behind me, the prickly pears still that now have invaded the site, the archaeological site. There are a few ruins here, but Jezreel to me represents two things. It represents Naboth, who was diligent. He wanted to honor God with what he was doing. He wanted to transfer the inheritance to his family, although Ahab wanted the vineyard and, of course, took it. And yet, Ahab, in contrast, was a very wicked king. And, of course, Jezebel wasn't too kosher herself. She was the one who probably introduced the worship of Baal and the Asherah to Israel. But when we talk about faith journeys, we have Ahab here on one hand, and we have someone who was wanting to do anything that he wanted just for himself. His faith journey was basically non-existent because he was selfish. He was someone who dishonored God with what he did, and Jezebel too. And of course, they would both die as evil king and queen, if you will. But when we talk about like prophets, like Elijah, who of course also was here, and there on that hill, Elisha, who, if you remember the story in 2 Kings 4, restored a woman's son to life after he died of heat stroke. Compare the role of the prophets Elijah and Elisha to Ahab and Jezebel. There's a big difference between them. Well, our faith journey really demands us to live right lives and not selfish lives. We are to live according to the ways of God, to walk in his pathways. And here we have a good example at Jezreel of those who did not do that. And of course, Ahab and Jezebel, his wife from Phoenicia, they exhibited a life of disobedience to God in real and tangible ways. They were hostile to God's ways, and they paid for it dearly here, especially Jezebel, who died a very, what can I say, a difficult death as she was thrown off the walls of this city. Maybe it happened right here. So in your walk of faith, be sure to walk diligently with God as Elijah and Elisha did. They served God faithfully, and that's what we are to do as well. Maybe one other lesson that we can learn is maybe we shouldn't drive our cars as crazy as Jehu drove his chariot there right behind me, coming from the east, from Ramoth Gilead, on his way to Jezreel. But we are to be careful in how we live our faith, and certainly we are to live in honor of God, who's called us to be his disciples. So from Tel Jezreel, overlooking the Harod Valley, and looking east in this case to the area of the hills of Gilead, be encouraged in your faith today. Walk with God, and he will indeed bless your life. Until next time, shalom.